Hello and welcome to Neurodiversity Enfield's Atlas course. Atlas stands for Autism, Training, Links and Support. And the course was developed here in Enfield to support all our local families in their journey to learning more about autism. Atlas is part of the support offered by Neurodiversity Enfield. You can watch the video before or after your child's autism assessment appointment with the Neurodiversity Enfield assessment team, NEAT. Once you have watched the video, you will be invited to select from a range of follow-up support for you and your child. This is offered by the Neurodiversity Enfield support team, NEST.
My name is Helen Cook and I'm a speech and language therapist, a mum to a neurodivergent daughter and part of a neurospicy family. More on that later.
In this recorded session, we would like you to leave with a better understanding of neurodiversity and autism, and we would like you to feel more confident about your role in your child's life. Take your time to watch and listen. You can pause at any time to go over any bits that you need more time to think about. We recommend watching it with someone else who knows your child well, so that you can pause and talk about them specifically, perhaps with a cup of tea and some biscuits. That bit's up to you. Before we start talking about autism, take a minute to think about what makes you smile about your child. It might be their sense of humour, cuddles or affection, or perhaps they love to dance or sing. Maybe you love it when your child learns something new or develops a new skill. As parents, there are so many moments that make us smile. But when you're going through a diagnostic process, it can be easy to forget these things and to focus on the challenges. But your child will learn best when they're happy and enjoying themselves. So hold on to all of those smiles and make sure to notice when they happen. Pause the video now and write down some of the things that make you smile about your very special child. When I've delivered this session in the past, there are always lots of answers to the question, what makes you smile about your child? Here are some of them. A bit about neurodiversity. You may have heard the word neurodiversity used a lot in the media. It's also part of the name of our service, Neurodiversity Enfield. So I'm going to spend a bit of time telling you about this and other words that we use a lot when supporting children in our team. Neurodiversity is a term used to describe the wonderfully varied thinking, learning and socializing styles we have as a human race. Everyone has a different brain. We are all neurodiverse. No two brains are exactly the same. It would be very difficult if we had to come up with a different teaching style for all of the 8.2 billion people in the world. So we find it helpful to look for similarities in learning styles instead. As a human race, we like to order and categorize to help us to make sense of the world, and we can do this with brains too. It is helpful to group similar brains into types so that we can understand how each person learns, socializes, and thrives in life. People might share similarities in characteristics like preferred learning styles, how they like to socialize, and what makes them thrive. The group you most closely relate to is called your neurotype. You might feel closer to people with similar neurotypes or find that you have a lot of things in common. Some people refer to this as finding their tribe. Neurotypical is the word used to describe the majority learning style. Neurodivergent is the term used to describe any brain function that is different to the norm or the majority. Neurodivergent, any type of brain other than neurotypical. There are lots of neurotypes. Some of the most common ones are neurotypical, autistic, ADHD, DCD, DLD, and Tourette's. This graphic, called Neurodiversity, is by a neurodivergent artist and speech and language therapist called NeuroWild. Won't it be wonderful when the world appreciates all our flavours? So, what is the message that we want all of our children to grow up hearing? There is nothing wrong with you. We are all working on things. That's part of being human. And the great thing is that once we know how our brains operate, we can support ourselves in making things easier. So today I want to introduce you to the neurotype called autism. Autism is neurodevelopmental. The neuro part of the word refers to the brain and nervous system. Developmental means that it is how your child's developed in the womb and their early years of life. Autism is lifelong. Autism is not an illness, it is not a disorder, and it is not a disease. It is not a medical condition with treatments or a cure. Your child is not broken. Autism is a processing difference that can have an impact on many areas of a person's life. There are many positive aspects of learning in an autistic way, as well as some challenges. We also know that autism is genetic. Just like physical traits such as eye colour and nose shape can be passed down through families, so can neurotypes. You may know that another person in your child's family is autistic, or you may just notice similarities or traits. Perhaps it's a particular skill at noticing patterns, or an ability to learn everything there is to know about a favourite topic. You may have started to notice similarities in yourselves since starting the diagnostic process with your child. It is never too late to learn more about your own brain. If you are interested in exploring a diagnosis as an adult, you can talk to your GP about the best way to do it. Of course, not everyone in your family will be autistic, but there is certainly a genetic link, which means there is an increased likelihood. Remember the power of genes. This picture is of my daughter as a baby. This one is of me as a baby, and this one is my son. In some pictures we have, it's actually quite hard to tell us apart at that age. And even now that they're growing older, we still share a lot of physical traits. There's no doubt that these are my children. We also share personality, learning and socializing traits too, and that will be the same in all families. Have you ever found yourself saying things like, she has the same sense of humour as her granddad, or his mum has the exact same attention to detail? Perhaps you've noticed that two people in your family both have a terrible sense of direction, or maybe when your child does something well, like learning to play football, you proudly think, oh, he gets those skills from me. Sometimes we just notice similar traits or characteristics. Other times we share whole neurotypes. Your family might be neurospicy like mine. This is just a popular way to say that you have lots of different neurotypes in your family. Maybe some of you are neurotypical, others might be autistic like your child, and others might have ADHD. You can also have a combination of neurotypes. I personally think that neurospicy families are amazing, but I am a bit biased. Just because it runs in families does not mean that it is your fault. You did not do anything to cause your child's autism. Your child is a product of a very specific combination of genes that makes them the unique and wonderful child that they are today. When they are finding things hard, please don't blame yourselves. You're here today learning how to support and understand your child, and that makes you a fabulous parent in my book. So I keep using the word neuro and talking about brains, but what do our brains actually do? The brain gets information from the outside world via our senses. It then processes and stores that information as memories. It can then use the stored information to inform and adapt our behaviour. So let's think of a couple of examples. If I touch a hot oven, the nerves in my fingers send a message to my brain. Basically, they say, ouch! My brain processes the information and sends a signal to my muscles to move away from the source of pain. It also stores a memory to tell me not to do that again. We also use the same process with other types of learning. Today you're using your vision and hearing to access this training. You're then processing and storing the information. Hopefully, you'll use that information to change your behaviour when supporting your young person. Clever, isn't it? So it stands to reason that if autistic children learn differently, we have to teach them differently. There is a lot of evidence that shows us that simply trying to force autistic learners to fit into a neurotypical mould doesn't work. We can't make them look more typical. We need to build the mould that works for them. And the first part of doing that is to understand how their brains work. When we give children a diagnosis of autism, a lot of parents ask us questions like, how bad is it? Or how autistic are they? We are being asked by the autistic community to avoid terms such as high and low functioning, or mild, moderate, and severely autistic. Instead, we're being asked to use the word autistic and to consider the individual's fluctuating profile. Let's take a minute to look at these autistic people. So Jamie wears nappies and uses a sippy cup. He also has the same dinner every night and cannot speak when he goes to his local cafe to order food. He uses an app on his watch instead. But he also has 20 years of experience building digital products for web, mobile, game platforms and beyond, and he's worked with leading brands such as BBC, Apple, HSBC, Sky and many others. He has a podcast and gives talks about being autistic to rooms filled with hundreds of people. He is incredibly clever. So, is Jamie severely autistic, mildly autistic, or somewhere in between? The truth is that he's an intelligent autistic man who thrives in some situations and finds others hard. His abilities fluctuate based on the environment around him and the support he's given. Now let's talk about Chloe Hayden. At the age of 13, Chloe had attended 10 different schools and had severe depression and anxiety. She had an eating disorder and chronic illnesses. She's clumsy and stims when excited or anxious, and she has unbearable meltdowns when the world is too overstimulating. Chloe is also an actress, best known for playing Quinny in Heartbreak High. She's an author of the incredible book, Different Not Less. She's a podcast host and very active in the disability rights movement. So, is Chloe severely autistic, mildly autistic, or somewhere in between? The truth is that she's an extraordinary autistic woman who thrives in some situations and finds others hard. Her abilities, just like Jamie's, fluctuate based on the environment around her. And last but not least, Stephen Wiltshire. So Stephen didn't speak until he was 9 years old. He attended a special school and was described as having a very low IQ. But he's an inspirational artist who has travelled the world for his work. 40,000 people came to see his first solo exhibition in London, and he has an MBE for his services to art. So what do we say about Stephen? Is he severely autistic, mildly autistic, or somewhere in between? You've guessed it. The truth is that he's an incredibly talented autistic artist who thrives in some situations and finds others hard. So there is no typical autistic person. Every autistic individual has their own strengths, differences and needs, their own life journey and their own unique story. And besides, the world needs neurodiversity. These are just some of the many autistic people who have used their particular talents and interests to become the very best at what they do. And if you notice, it's not just scientists and mathematicians either, is it? You'll find autistic actors, models, sportsmen and women, environmentalists, academics, teachers, medics, and every other talent you can imagine. The world is their oyster. Autistic people are often defined by what they can't do rather than what they can do. We don't do this with other people. I've never heard anyone say, oh, Beyonce's a great singer, but she's terrible at basketball. So I encourage you to pause for a minute to think about what your child can do. They're only young at the moment, so they won't be incredible programmers, authors, or artists yet. But what child is? Start to notice their skills and focus on developing and admiring those. When are they at their happiest? What are they learning to do independently? When is life harder for them? By understanding your child's profile, you will be starting the journey to understanding how to support them to become the very best and happiest version of themselves possible. I hope you've got a lovely list of strengths for your child. If not, pause, have another little break, go and get yourself another cup of tea. And then we can come back and talk about CSI and the 3 key areas of difference. So whilst acknowledging the importance of looking at each individual person, it's also helpful to think about the areas where we know that autistic learners and neurotypical learners differ. We'll spend the rest of this session thinking about these 3 areas. Autistic people and neurotypical people demonstrate differences in 3 key areas. They are communication, sensory processing, and information processing. I find it helpful to remember this as CSI. Now in America, CSI stands for Crime Scene Investigation. Obviously there's no crime scene here, but it is our responsibility to investigate and to be good detectives to fully understand each individual child and young person. So remember CSI, communication, sensory processing and information processing. Let's start with communication. Communication is transferring messages between one person and another. It's a two-way process that needs 2 or more people. We can speak to ourselves when no one is listening, but we can only communicate when someone else is involved. So communication is social. It's also interactive. In this picture, you can see that one person is expressing themselves and the other is receiving. In typical conversation, we take it in turns. Successful communication is teamwork, and all people in the team need to work hard to ensure that the result is successful. But why do we bother? We get so much from communication. It's not simply about making demands and getting our needs met. It's also about playing, commenting, sharing information for pleasure and joy, asking for help, and so much more. Now, we all know that we can communicate by talking, but that is definitely not all that we do. Some people say that 80% of communication is non-verbal. But what does that mean? We're going to watch a short video now, and I want you to think about all of the ways that we can understand the video without understanding the words that are spoken. I'll tell you now, the characters in the film are speaking Penguinese, which none of us can speak. So you can't use the words to help you understand the story. You'll have to use other communication skills. Write down as many as you can whilst you're watching the video, and then come back afterwards and we'll see if you got them all right.
Ma che maniera avete di essere...
Amerikanen blir föregående människor.
Amerikanen vill nog få det med det som man är med dum. Amerikanen vill se med. Det är inte kan det bara. Den har inte bara. Kan det se med för? I can now be seen.
So how do we communicate?
Okay, so let's see how many of them you got. So we talked about speech already, didn't we? We speak to each other, and Pingu, his mum and his dad are talking. Now we didn't understand the language, so we had to rely on non-verbal skills. So intonation. Did you notice the way their voices moved up and down to show different feelings and different emotions throughout the session? So, for instance, Pingu's dad at the beginning, his voice changes, doesn't it? So at first he's cross when Pingu's not eating his vegetables, and he says something like like that. And in the end, when Pingu asks him to blow up his ball, he goes mm-hmm. It's a very different intonation. One of them says, eat your vegetables, and the other one says, yeah, sure, no problem. So without knowing the words, we know when Pingu is in trouble or when he isn't, just by his dad's voice. Now, the next one I want to talk about is posture, and I think the ice cream is the best example of this. So at first, Mum is very happy for Pingu to have some ice cream. Her posture is open and welcoming. She nods her head and her intonation is positive. But then when Pingu eats too much, this changes completely. She pulls away, she hunches her shoulders and she shakes her head, and her intonation is also more negative. So Mum changes her answer from yes to no with just her body language. And we all do this. We lean forwards to show interest, or sometimes even aggression, and we move away to show boredom or fear. We all know about eye contact, or eye gaze as it's sometimes called. We use our eye contact to show that we're listening and interested in someone, but also to ask for things. So I could ask you for something using something called 3-point gaze, where I draw your attention to something in particular. So I would look at you, then I'd look at an object, and then I'd look back at you. And by doing that, you would also share my attention. The next one is facial expressions. So we use our facial expressions to show a whole range of feelings and emotions. Expressions can be very meaningful and often give us away when we're trying to hide how we actually feel. Proximity is simply how close or far away from someone we are. And we use that to communicate too. So if I'm delivering a training session in person and you all stood up and walked out of the room, that would be very good communication that what I was doing wasn't very interesting. But a teacher might use it too, mightn't they? They might walk around the room to show who they're communicating with at any one time. A bully might stand too close to his or her victim to intimidate them. We also use timing to know when it's our turn to speak. And when this goes wrong, we can interpret this as rude, aggressive, bored, or even impatient. Gestures. We use our hands to make gestures that are familiar in our own cultures, such as waving and putting our thumbs up. But we also wave them around to emphasize our messages. I'm doing this now as I record this session, even though I know you can't see me. We use the context. So what do we know around us? We understand that if we walk into a room and someone is at the front talking, we should tiptoe in quietly and make ourselves as small as possible. We know that it's okay to sit next to a stranger on the bus when there's only one seat left, but less acceptable if the bus is almost empty. In the Pingu film, we know that it's dinner time because we all have experience of sitting at a table and eating dinner. So when you think about communication, don't just think about talking. Think about the wonderfully complex and brilliant world of verbal and non-verbal communication with each other. But I haven't spent all of this time talking about communication because I'm a speech and language therapist and I love talking about communication. It's also essential that we understand communication so that we can understand the autistic brain better. Autistic people can and do communicate. They can and do have friendships, relationships, careers, and everything else that neurotypical communicators have. But it does seem that they have to work a little harder to make communication successful. You could think about this as a sort of bubble. It's not impossible to get messages to autistic learners, but you do have to work harder. That bubble does not just make talking harder, but all the other areas of communication as well. Interpreting facial expressions may be more challenging. Listening to the nuance of tones of voice and understanding what they mean can be difficult. Knowing that when someone starts to walk away, it may be because they've really had enough of learning about the latest Pokemon character and all of its many fantastic attributes. Interestingly, some autistic adults tell us that they don't find it hard to communicate with other autistic adults. The challenge seems to be about autistic communicator and and neurotypical communicators working together. This is part of something that is known as the double empathy problem. We need to stop thinking about autism as a disorder and neurotypical learning as the gold standard. To succeed, we need to share responsibility as equal partners in the communicating team. And let's not forget that communication is two-way. That autistic child or young person may also find it much harder to get messages across to you as well. They may use behaviours such as grabbing your hand rather than words such as, "Can I have a drink?" And they may get very easily overwhelmed by the challenges of communicating in a world where no one seems to teach them the social rules. When we're anxious, we all find it harder to communicate effectively. You may have found yourself getting tongue-tied or stammering over words when you're stressed. You may think of the most wonderful comeback to an argument with a significant other a few hours after the heated discussion. This is the same for autistic people, except the differences in abilities are more extreme. A 13-year-old autistic girl may be able to talk to you all day long about the Egyptians, but might be really quite silent in a large group of children in the playground. Or that 9-year-old boy who can tell you all of the Arsenal scores from the weekend, but might become mute when the teacher asks him a question in class. And let's not forget that the English language is a pain. We really don't always say what we actually mean. In this video, this toddler does exactly what he's told to do, but it's not exactly what his dad meant him to do. Let's take a look.
You gotta keep your eyes on the ball. You gotta keep your eyes on the ball.
So, autistic people are much more likely to misunderstand phrases like these and to act accordingly. And non-literal phrases like these can be confusing at best and terrifying at worst.
You gotta keep.
Have a think about your child's communication. They may not be speaking yet, but I bet they're communicating. Maybe they run out of the room, using proximity to show that they don't like something, or maybe they move your hand towards a favourite toy to make a request. Take your time to notice all of these types of communication and maybe before carrying on with this video. Let's move on to the second area of difference, sensory processing. Do you remember that I told you that our brains get information from the outside world via our senses? Well, you've probably been told that you have 5 senses, the ones at the top of this slide: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. In fact, we have a lot more senses, 3 of which are important to understand when we're thinking about autism. These 3 are vestibular, proprioception, and interoception. They are sometimes known as the hidden senses because they take place inside our bodies rather than outside. Let's start with vestibular. This is the motion sense and is located in your inner ear. It is responsible for movement and balance, and it is why we don't fall over all the time. If you have ever felt travel sick, this is because the liquid in your inner ear is telling your brain that you are moving, but your eyes are telling you that you're sitting still. Your brain gets all confused and you feel sick. But some people love playing around with this sense. Have you ever been to a fairground? Think about all of the rides. They play with your vestibular sense. They make you rock and spin, turn upside down and in circles, go fast and then slow. And you get an adrenaline rush from the craziness of it all. A lot of autistic people love this feeling. You'll know them. They're the rock and rollers. They might hang upside down, spin in circles, rock on their chair, jump from high surfaces. They are never still. They get a wonderful feeling from this type of vestibular movement. The next hidden sense is proprioception. This is all about body awareness and is located in your muscles and joints. This is how I know whether I'm sitting or standing without using my eyes to check. It's how I know how hard to press on when I type on the keyboard. My muscles and joints are constantly giving me feedback. Some autistic people don't get so much of this feedback, so they can feel uncomfortable when they're in a position where they have to rely on it. Standing in an empty space can be uncomfortable or even painful. Some autistic people make the world more manageable by putting themselves in safer positions. They might follow a pavement or the painted lines on a playground rather than walking through the middle. They might lean on the wall or a bookshelf at carpet time. They might touch the wall as they walk through the dinner hall. So don't force them to sit up straight or stand in a space. Plan for them to have a wall to lean on, or a circle to stand in, or a line to follow. The third hidden sense is interoception. This is the feedback our bodies give us to keep us well and healthy. We know when we're thirsty or hungry, sick or tired, scared or out of breath. We're learning more about this sense in relation to autism, but it does seem that there are differences here. Autistic people often don't know that they're hungry or if they need the loo. They might experience some sensations as unbearable pain, but might miss others without any feedback at all. Watch this short clip about sensory processing from a young autistic child's perspective. He mentions 7 sensory systems because we did not know much about interoception when the video was made. But the advice is still spot on.
Everyone has 7 sensory systems. They are sound, taste, smell, vision, touch, proprioceptive, and vestibular. Under-responsive versus over-responsive. You can think of each your sensory systems as being a cup, and water is that type of a sensory input. If you are under-responsive to a certain sensory input, it is like you're a big, huge cup. You keep getting water to the big cup. You can just keep adding, but it never feels full. But if you are over-responsive, it is like you are a tiny cup. All you need is just a little sensory input and you overflow. You want your cup to be full and not spill over. Each of your sensory systems is their own cup and they are different sizes. Just because you have one big cup does not mean you are under-responsive with all your senses. I have a big cup for my proprioceptive and vestibular senses and a little cup for my touch, sound, taste, and smell senses. Everyone is different and unique.
Isn't he great? I love his analogy of the cups. I think we can all relate to the idea of a cup that is running out. Perhaps you can think about being hungry. As your cup runs out, it becomes harder and harder to focus on anything else and to concentrate on what you're meant to be doing. Similarly, if you think about something like the fire alarm going off, I expect we all would have very small cups. We wouldn't be able to stay in a room with a loud fire alarm blaring for long without feeling overwhelmed. Now, why this is important for autistic people is that the balance of these cups can be quite fragile. An autistic child may move quickly from feeling okay to being overwhelmed. It's also important to remember that for an autistic child, the impact of an empty cup may be just as challenging as an overwhelming one. If an autistic child needs to rock and roll because of an empty vestibular cup, they'll not be able to learn or feel comfortable in themselves until they have done it. Next time your child is in distress or struggling, think to yourself, does one of their cups need filling up, or is one of them overflowing? It might start to help you to understand the challenges they're facing.
You want your child's cup to be nicely full. This is how they will feel best and learn best. If it is running out, they will find ways to fill it up. They'll not be able to focus on learning or playing or socialising. If their cup is overflowing, they'll try to escape. Again, they'll not be able to focus or learn or play or experience joy. So what do we do if we're overwhelmed? We do what our instincts have been telling us to do since the dawn of time. We've got three options: fight, flight, or freeze. A fight response in a child might look like a meltdown. The child might push the offending sensory item away. They might break it. They might try to compete with it by being louder. A flight response is to run away and to escape by any means possible. If escape isn't possible, they may cover their ears or hide under a blanket. A freeze response is the worst, in my opinion. This is when the child is so overwhelmed that they have to shut down and cannot fight or escape. They freeze. They look passive or uninterested because they can no longer engage. They're in survival mode. This is the evolutionary equivalent of playing dead. So our job is to help them to stay just right. Ideally, we avoid them becoming low and under-responsive or high and over-responsive. But when this isn't possible, we learn to recognise the signs and to support the child to regulate and get back to that just right place. And what we don't do is ignore the need. Imagine if someone told you, oh, just stop feeling hungry. With all the willpower in the world, you're going to be hungry until you eat. This is the same as telling some autistic children to sit still or stop flapping. They'll have the need to do it until you allow them to meet the need. What does your child do that gives them joy? Do they flap their hands? Do they rock? Do they chew? What do they do when life is tough? Do they use fight, flight, or freeze to cope? Think about your child's sensory responses before you carry on listening. So on to the final area of difference, information processing. This has been called all sorts of things over the years, but I think information processing summarises it quite well. This is the section where we think about what happens to information when it is stored in the brain and how it is processed. Autistic people may process the world in specific ways. This can be different to neurotypical learners. Remember that there are advantages and disadvantages to both ways of processing the world. One may be more common, but it does not mean that it is better, and every child, no matter what their neurotype, has strengths. Autistic people can be very interested in certain things. The degree of interest and time spent can be more extreme than other children and adults. This can be a very good thing. If you think about the people you like to spend time with, they're often people who share your interests and passions with you. Special interests are a great foundation for meaningful relationships. Now think about the world of work. I would much prefer to employ someone who was fascinated by the type of work I was offering them and who spent all of their free time finding out more about it too. Special interests are also a source of joy, calm and mindfulness for autistic children. Autistic learners are often very good at noticing details. This can have an impact on how they learn all sorts of things, from language to details about other people. There are many areas of life where having an eye for detail is a bonus. A neurotypical learner may walk into the room and instantly notice 5 people, decide which ones they like, who they're talking to or who they're not talking to, and who they're going to go and play with. An autistic learner may notice the beautiful patterns being made by the confetti falling out of the piñata, the type of drink available in the drink dispenser, and the fact that the table is in a different place to normal. Neither of these perspectives is wrong. Neither is worse or better. They're just different. So next time you're cross because your child doesn't immediately say hello to Granny when you go and visit, try to remember that they might not even have seen Granny straight away. But they might be the first person to notice her beautiful and very expensive new curtains. We also know that this focus on the detail can make it hard to see the bigger picture. You can do an activity to imagine what this might be like. So take a toilet roll or make your hands into a tube shape and look through that toilet roll or tube shape. Then have a look around the room and try to imagine what it would be like to walk into a room, for example, at work with a meeting. So if you were looking through that toilet roll, you might only be able to focus on a few bits at a time. So you might see the coffee machine or the floor or the chairs, but you might not notice that the boss had already started talking and that everyone was sitting quietly in the room. That could be a bit like how your child experiences the world, piece by piece, adding up the little bits of detail to make an overall whole. In a similar way, autistic people may be very good at focusing in on one sense at a time. This is great when they're busy working or playing with something and they're able to tune out those around them. It is less helpful when they've not noticed that the play session has finished and all the other children have moved to circle time, or when you've been calling them to come to the dinner table for 10 minutes. Some people call this selective hearing, but this suggests that the child has a choice. In fact, they may simply not have heard you call their name. It can also be difficult for some autistic people to block out external noise, so they tune into everything. This can create anxiety and difficulty concentrating. Temple Grandin is a very famous autistic woman, and she talks about this idea of finding details more important than generalizations. She is often confused by the common small talk question, "Do you like dogs?" She explains that it's very hard for her to answer such a broad question. She can tell you if she likes the neighbour's dog or the dog she sees on her walk around the park each day, but cannot possibly say if she likes all dogs when they can be so different from one another, as shown in this picture. A similar pattern happens in the way that we learn about other people as well. Neurotypical people are good at noticing general information about people and combining it to make a whole summary of the person. Autistic children are brilliant at noticing the details about people, but sometimes find it hard to link these together to make a summary. I was reminded of this when working with a child in reception many years ago now. The first visit to school passed without incident. The second visit was not so successful. The child hid under the table and refused to come out. When I sat under the table with him and asked him why he was upset, he said, "I'm waiting for Helen, so I can't come with you." I told him that I was Helen, and he replied, "You're not my Helen." I asked him what his Helen was like, and he explained that she had glasses and frizzy hair. On the second visit to school, I was wearing my contact lenses and had tied my hair back. To this child, these differences were enough for him to categorise the Helen of the first visit and the Helen of the second visit as two different people. That phrase will always stay in my head. You're not my Helen. Another pattern that we notice in the learning styles of autistic children is that many of them thrive on routine and order and can find the neurotypical world chaotic. Imagine this start to the day. Your child's favourite cereal has a new and improved recipe. To you, it tastes exactly the same, but to your child, who has a brilliantly sensitive sense of taste, it's not the same. It might end up being thrown on the floor. Now, your child likes to wear their favourite socks to school, but they're still in the washing machine from the night before. You offer some that look very similar, but to your child, they don't feel exactly the same. Then it's time to go to school and there are roadworks on the pavement. So you have to cross the road and go to the other side instead. To a neurotypical learner, this might be no more than a minor nuisance, but to an autistic learner, it might feel really unsettling. It might feel like their whole route to school had been changed. Now your child gets to school and the teacher has a new perfume and smells different. To a child with excellent sense of smell, this might be really uncomfortable, and perhaps it might even feel like this is not my teacher anymore. Maybe they've changed the display in the classroom and your child feels unsure about whether this is the same room, the same classroom, the right place for them to be in. And perhaps the whiteboard has stopped working, so they don't have their normal morning activity. So before the day has even begun, your child could be completely unsettled, scared, or even unhappy. We often talk about autistic children not liking change, but that's a bit too simplistic. Often it's more bringing order to a very chaotic world.
Don't forget that we all use strategies to bring order to the chaos. Perhaps you get ready for work in the same order each day, or maybe you go to work the same way each day. Maybe you write lists. Bringing order to the chaos is one way you can make your autistic child's life happier and easier and help them to feel safe. It's an easy win and can make you the world's best parent when you get it right. Autistic children and young people sometimes have to learn that other people have thoughts and feelings that are different to theirs. This is sometimes known as theory of mind. It is quite typical for children not to realise that they need to tell people what they can see or what they're thinking when they're very young. As we get older, neurotypical children realise that they have to tell people these things. Like in this cartoon, an older neurotypical child would know that they had to tell the person on the phone what they were playing with. Autistic children often find this harder or develop this skill later than their neurotypical peers. You might notice that your child will tell you all about someone at school, forgetting that you don't know who that person is that they're talking about. Just a quick note on behaviour today. There's no such thing as autistic behaviour. Remember that all aspects of autism can lead to increased anxiety, and increased anxiety can lead to a fight, flight, or freeze response. These responses may challenge us and the autistic child. Focusing on the behaviour won't lead to change. Focusing on the reason for the behaviour will. You might find it helpful to think about distressed behaviour rather than challenging behaviour. When we look at the three areas of difference and the impact of being a neurominority in a world that has been designed to suit neurotypical learners, it's not surprising that some autistic people experience higher levels of anxiety than neurotypical learners. Anxiety can become completely debilitating. We know that mental health difficulties are higher in the autistic population, but they are not an inevitability. We need to adapt our environments and the support we offer in a way that actively considers reducing anxiety for our young children every single day. And this is where the idea of reasonable adjustments comes in. Look at the top scenario. Everyone is being treated equally, which sounds fair. They have all been given the same resource, in this case a bike. But look carefully and it's clear that giving everyone the same resource isn't the answer. The lady in the wheelchair cannot use the bike at all, and it's the wrong size for the man and the boy. Only the third lady on this top scenario has what she needs to be able to go on a bike ride. Now look at the second scenario. This is what we should be aiming at. Here, no one has the same resource, but everyone has what they need to succeed in going for a bike ride. Support isn't about providing the same thing for everyone, but rather the reasonable adjustments that everyone needs to thrive. Does your child have any special interests? Do they like routine and order? Are they really good at focusing on the details? Get that detective hat out again and use it to understand how your child processes information. So that brings us to the end of your introduction to autism from the Atlas course. I will leave you with one final message. With understanding and support from families and professionals working together, autistic children and young people can learn, enjoy life, and thrive. Let's help them to shine. What next? That was a lot of information. Take your time to process it. Watch it with other people. Go back over bits that didn't make sense or things that feel really, really relevant.
Please use this QR code to provide feedback for this presentation.
You can get in touch with the Neurodiversity Enfield team using the contact details here. Thank you for listening today and for making sure your child has the best possible chance to thrive.